To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, 25 Years of Nothing. Vince Montgomery adjusted his tie for the third time that evening, staring at his reflection in the office bathroom mirror. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under his eyes, making him look older than his 52 years. Tonight was supposed to be special. 25 years with Hartwell Engineering, a quarter-century of designing bridges, highways, and infrastructure that would outlast him by generations. The conference room had been decorated with balloons and a banner reading, "Congratulations, Vince." His assistant, Betty, had organized everything, catered food, drinks, even a slideshow of his major projects. The invitation had gone out to everyone. His wife Linda, their children Derek and Ashley, his colleagues, and friends from the industry. Vince walked back to the conference room at exactly 7 o'clock. The table was set for 30 people. The projector hummed softly, displaying photos of the Harrison Bridge he designed 5 years ago. Betty stood by the door, checking her watch with a worried expression. "Maybe they're running late?" she offered, though her voice lacked conviction. By 7:30, only Betty and 2 junior engineers remained. The caterers began packing up the untouched food. Vince sat alone at the head table, mechanically eating a piece of cake while watching his career highlights play on loop. The Harrison Bridge, the Interstate 94 expansion, the downtown revitalization project that had won state awards. "Mr. Montgomery," Betty said gently, "I'm so sorry. I don't understand." "It's fine, Betty. You can go home." His voice was steady, but something cold had settled in his chest. Vince drove home in silence, the empty passenger seat a reminder of Linda's absence. Their colonial house in Maple Heights sat dark except for a single light in Derek's old room. At 24, their son still lived at home, claiming he was finding himself after college while working part-time at a gaming store. The front door was unlocked. Vince found Derek in the kitchen, raiding the refrigerator while talking loudly on his phone. "Can't believe the old man actually thought people would show up," Derek was saying, laughing. "Like anyone gives a shit about his boring job." Vince stood frozen in the doorway. "Yeah, Mom's still at Rick's place. She said she'd rather get a root canal than sit through another one of Dad's engineering stories." Derek grabbed a beer, popping it open. "Honestly, we're all just waiting for him to kick the bucket so we can finally get something useful out of this family. Mom can move in with Rick, and I can sell this dump." The words hit Vince like physical blows. Derek continued, oblivious to his father's presence. "Ashley thinks we should put him in a home soon anyway. Dude's becoming a fossil." Derek's laughter was cruel, cutting. "Mom says Rick's already looking at condos for them. They're just waiting for the inheritance to clear." Vince backed away silently, his engineering mind already calculating, processing, planning. In his study, he powered up his computer and began making calls. First, his lawyer, then his financial advisor. By midnight, he had transferred most of his assets to a trust fund with very specific conditions. The house, the investment accounts, the life insurance, all of it restructured. The will was rewritten entirely. Derek and Ashley's college funds, which he'd been planning to expand, were redirected. Linda's access to their joint accounts was quietly severed. Vince Montgomery, who had spent 25 years building bridges, was now systematically burning them. He packed a single suitcase with essentials and left before dawn, taking only his truck and a small account Linda didn't know about. By sunrise, he was 3 states away, beginning a new life that none of them knew existed. Chapter 2, The Missing Person. Linda Montgomery stood in her kitchen 3 days later, screaming into her phone at Derek. "What do you mean he's gone? People don't just disappear." Derek lounged against the counter, a bowl of cereal in his hands. "Chill, Mom. He probably went on some midlife crisis road trip. He'll be back when he gets hungry." But Linda wasn't convinced. She'd returned from Rick's apartment that morning to find Vince's study cleaned out, his clothes missing, and his truck gone. More concerning was the message from their bank about account restructuring that she didn't understand. "This isn't like him," she muttered, pacing. "Vincent doesn't do impulsive things. He plans everything." Rick Hawthorne arrived an hour later, all concern and helpfulness. At 45, he was everything Vincent wasn't: spontaneous, charming, and wealthy from his family's real estate business. He'd been Linda's lover for 8 months, ever since they'd met at the country club. Maybe he found out about us, Rick suggested, wrapping his arms around Linda from behind. Impossible. Vincent's completely oblivious. He probably doesn't even remember what I look like anymore. But doubt crept into her voice. Derek's phone rang. Yeah, Ashley's here, he announced. Their daughter burst through the front door, her anxiety palpable. Ashley Montgomery had graduated from State University 6 months ago with a degree in marketing and dreams of opening her own agency. At 22, she shared her brother's sense of entitlement, but with more strategic thinking. I tried calling him 40 times, Ashley said, breathless. It goes straight to voicemail. Mom, what if something happened? What if he had an accident? He's fine, Derek said dismissively. Probably camping somewhere, crying about his pathetic retirement party. You knew about that? Linda snapped. Course I knew. You told me to skip it, remember? Said it would be boring as hell. Linda's face flushed. She had indeed told the children not to attend, claiming they had better things to do. Rick had suggested a romantic dinner instead, and she'd agreed readily. We need to call the police, Ashley insisted. And tell them what? That a grown man decided to take a vacation. Derek laughed, but Ashley was already dialing. Within hours, 2 officers arrived to take a missing person report. They asked standard questions: recent behavior changes, financial troubles, health issues, marital problems. He's been distant lately, Linda admitted carefully. Working long hours, stressed about retirement. The officers were thorough but not overly concerned. Middle-aged men having midlife crises was common. They'd put out a bolo for his truck and check hospitals, but beyond that, they'd wait. Unless there's evidence of foul play or he's considered endangered, we usually give adults time to surface on their own, Officer Rodriguez explained. After the police left, the family gathered in the living room. The silence was thick with unspoken tensions. What if he doesn't come back? Ashley asked quietly. He will, Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction. Derek shrugged. If he doesn't, we inherit everything faster. Ashley shot him a disgusted look. That's horrible, Derek. What? I'm being practical. Dad's been checking out of this family for years anyway. Rick cleared his throat. Maybe we should consider that Vincent might have overheard something. People going through emotional stress sometimes make dramatic gestures. Linda felt ice in her veins. Like what? Like finding out his wife is having an affair. The room fell silent. Derek's spoon clattered against his bowl. He doesn't know, Linda whispered. Are you sure? Rick's voice was gentle but probing. Think about it, Linda. A man doesn't just vanish without reason. That night, as Linda lay alone in the bed she'd shared with Vincent for 26 years, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something crucial. Vincent had always been methodical, calculated. If he was gone, it wasn't random. Somewhere, her husband was planning something. And Vincent Montgomery had never failed to complete a project once he started. Chapter 3: The Engineer's Blueprint. 400 miles away, Vincent sat in a small cabin he'd rented under a false name in the Appalachian Mountains. The space was sparse but functional, exactly what he needed for planning. His laptop screen displayed multiple windows, financial records, property searches, background checks, and detailed files on everyone who had betrayed him. The past week had been productive. Using contacts from 25 years in engineering, Vincent had quietly gathered intelligence on his family's true nature. What he discovered exceeded his worst expectations. Derek had been stealing money from Linda's purse for months, funding a gambling addiction that had cost him nearly $15,000. Ashley had been applying for jobs using Vincent's professional references without permission, claiming to be his business partner in emails to potential employers. And Linda's affair with Rick went back further than 8 months. Much further. Vincent opened a folder marked Hawthorne Research. Rick's family owned Hawthorne Properties, a successful business built on 3 generations of hard work. But Rick himself was the weak link, a man who'd never earned anything, content to live off family money while seducing married women. Vincent had found evidence of at least 2 other affairs in the past 5 years. More interesting was Rick's financial situation. Despite appearances, he was hemorrhaging money. Bad investments, expensive tastes, and a cocaine habit had left him nearly broke. He needed Linda's money, specifically Vincent's money, to maintain his lifestyle. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator, A former colleague named Tony Russo who'd left engineering for more lucrative work. Got what you wanted. Linda and Rick have been planning your accident for months. Found recordings in Rick's apartment. You need to hear this. The audio files Tony sent were devastating. Linda and Rick discussing Vincent's life insurance, his pension, how to make his death look natural. They'd researched everything from staged car accidents to medication tampering. $2 million in life insurance, plus the house, plus his retirement fund. Linda's voice was cold, calculating. We just need to be patient. I'm tired of waiting, Rick replied. The man's healthy as a horse. Could live another 30 years. Not if he has an accident. Vincent's always working on dangerous projects. Construction sites, bridge inspections, accidents happen. Vincent sat back, his hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from rage so pure it was almost cleansing. They hadn't just betrayed him, they'd planned his murder. He opened a new document on his laptop and began typing. The title read, Project Reckoning, Final Blueprint. Vincent had spent his career building things that lasted. Now he would engineer something different. The complete destruction of everyone who had betrayed him. Not through violence. That was crude, inelegant. No, Vincent would use what he knew best, systematic planning, precise execution, and the patience to see a complex project through to completion. Phase 1 was already complete. He'd vanished, forcing them to show their true nature to the police and each other. The missing person report created a paper trail that would be useful later. Phase 2 involved financial pressure. Vincent had moved their assets carefully, legally, using trusts and offshore accounts his lawyer had set up years ago for tax purposes. Linda would soon discover she had no access to the family money. The house was mortgaged against accounts she couldn't touch. Rick would watch his lifestyle crumble as Linda became a liability instead of an asset. Phase 3 was more complex. Vincent had been developing it since receiving Tony's recordings. It involved psychological warfare, legal maneuvering, and a few highly illegal activities that would destroy them professionally and personally. But first, he needed to surface again. Let them find him. Let them think they were in control. Vincent had learned long ago that the best traps were the ones your enemies walked into willingly. He picked up a burner phone and dialed 911. I'd like to report that I'm safe, he said when the dispatcher answered. My name is Vincent Montgomery. I believe my family filed a missing person report. Within an hour, police would track the call to a gas station 50 miles from his actual location. They'd find Vincent's truck abandoned there, along with a note claiming he needed time to think and would return soon. The message would reach Linda by evening. She'd be relieved, then worried, then angry as she realized Vincent was coming back with knowledge and a plan. Vincent smiled as he deleted the files from his laptop and began packing. The foundation of his revenge was laid. Now it was time to start building. Chapter 4. The Return. The police call came at 8:47 p.m. Officer Rodriguez's voice was professionally neutral but tinged with relief. Mrs. Montgomery? We've located your husband. He's safe and indicated he'll be returning home soon. Linda gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles went white. Where was he? Is he okay? What happened? He left a message at a gas station in Pennsylvania. Said he needed time to think and apologizes for any worry. We found his truck there, but he'd apparently caught a bus. These situations usually resolve themselves, ma'am. After hanging up, Linda stared at her reflection in the kitchen window. Something felt wrong. Vincent didn't catch buses. Vincent planned everything, researched everything, never made impulsive decisions. The man who spent 3 weeks choosing a new toaster didn't just disappear for a week on a whim. Rick emerged from the living room where he'd been watching television with Derek and Ashley. What did they say? He's coming back. Linda's voice was flat. They found his truck in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania? Ashley looked confused. What's in Pennsylvania? Probably some engineering conference, Derek muttered, not looking up from his phone. Guy lives for that boring shit. Rick studied Linda's face carefully. You don't look relieved. I'm not. Linda began pacing again, a habit that had intensified over the past week. This isn't like Vincent. He's methodical. If he left, he had a reason. If he's coming back, he has a reason for that too. Maybe he just needed space, Ashley offered, but her voice lacked conviction. Space from what? Vincent loves his routine, loves his schedule. The only time he's ever been spontaneous was when he proposed, and even then he'd been planning it for 6 months. Rick moved closer, lowering his voice. Linda, what if he knows? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Derek finally looked up from his phone, alert now to the conversation. Knows what? Derek asked. Linda and Rick exchanged glances. They'd been careful around the children, maintaining the fiction that Rick was just a family friend. But Derek wasn't stupid, and Ashley was even sharper. Nothing, Linda said quickly. Rick's just… Oh, come on. Derek interrupted, rolling his eyes. We're not blind. You two have been sneaking around for months. Dad probably figured it out. Ashley's face went pale. Mom? Is that true? Linda felt the family's carefully maintained facade crumbling. It's complicated. It's simple, Derek said with a harsh laugh. Mom's banging Rick, Dad found out. And now he's probably talking to lawyers. He looked directly at Rick. Hope you're ready to support her, because there goes the inheritance. Derek, Ashley snapped. Show some respect. Respect for what? The family that's been lying to each other for months? At least I'm honest about being a screw-up. Rick stepped forward, his businessman's charm kicking in. Look, everyone needs to calm down. We don't know what Vincent knows or doesn't know. When he comes back, we'll figure it out like adults. And if he does know? Ashley asked quietly. The question silenced the room. Vincent Montgomery wasn't known for dramatic confrontations or emotional outbursts. But he also wasn't known for forgiveness. In 26 years of marriage, Linda had never seen him let a grudge go. He held on to slights for years, methodically planning responses that were always proportional and devastatingly effective. He won't do anything crazy, Linda said, trying to convince herself as much as the others. Vincent's practical. He'll want to minimize damage, protect his reputation. Unless he doesn't care about his reputation anymore, Rick said thoughtfully. That night, Linda lay awake cataloging every conversation, every moment, every potential sign that Vincent knew about her affair. Had he installed cameras? Hired a private investigator? Was he building a case against her? The more she thought about it, the more terrified she became. Vincent Montgomery was the most patient, thorough person she'd ever known. If he was planning something, it would be comprehensive, devastating, and impossible to stop once it started. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coming home tomorrow. We need to talk. V. Linda stared at the message until her eyes burned. The phrasing was classic Vincent, direct, efficient, ominous in its simplicity. She forwarded it to Rick, then spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, waiting for dawn and dreading it in equal measure. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Vincent sat in a diner reviewing his final preparations. Tomorrow, he would return to the life he'd built and begin the careful process of watching it burn. But this time, he wouldn't be caught in the flames. This time, he was bringing the match. Chapter 5, The Gathering Storm. Vincent pulled into his driveway at exactly 2 p.m. the next afternoon, driving a rental car instead of his usual truck. He'd calculated the timing precisely, late enough that Derek would be awake, early enough that the family would be together for what he privately called the revelation. The house looked the same from the outside, but Vincent saw it differently now. Not as a home, but as a target. He'd built this life carefully over 26 years, and now he would dismantle it with the same precision. Linda appeared at the front door before he reached it, her face a mask of worry and forced relief. Vincent, thank God you're okay. We were so worried. Were you? His voice was calm, conversational. That's interesting. Linda's expression faltered. Of course we were. The police, the missing person report. Yes, I heard about that. Very thorough of you. Vincent walked past her into the house, noting how she stepped back as if afraid of contact. Is everyone here? Derek's upstairs. Ashley's in the kitchen. Vincent, what happened? Where were you? I took some time to think. To plan. He set his bag down deliberately. Is Rick here too? Linda's face went white. Rick? Why would… no, he's not. Linda. Vincent's voice cut through her stammering like a blade. Please don't insult my intelligence. Not now. Derek bounded down the stairs, earbuds around his neck and an energy drink in his hand. Dad. Dude, you can't just disappear like that. Mom was freaking out. His tone was casual, but Vincent caught the calculating look in his son's eyes. Ashley emerged from the kitchen, genuinely concerned. Of all his family members, she'd always been the most honest with him, which made her complicity in the family's betrayal even more painful. Dad, are you okay? You look different. Vincent studied his daughter. She did care about him, in her way. But caring hadn't stopped her from using his name and reputation for her own benefit. Hadn't stopped her from waiting for his inheritance like the others. I'm fine, Ashley. Better than I've been in years, actually. He looked around the living room. His living room, paid for with his salary, filled with furniture he'd chosen. I think we should all sit down. Have a family meeting. A family meeting? Derek laughed. What are we, 12? Sit down, Derek. Something in Vincent's tone made Derek comply immediately. Ashley took her usual spot on the sofa. Linda remained standing, as if ready to run. I said sit down. Linda perched on the edge of a chair, her hands trembling slightly. Vincent remained standing, looking down at them like an engineer surveying a job site. I've had an enlightening week. Learned quite a lot about my family. About what you really think of me. Dad, Ashley started. Please don't interrupt. Vincent's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. I heard Derek's phone conversation the night of my retirement party. The one where he explained how everyone was waiting for me to die, so you could inherit something useful. Derek's face flushed red. Dad, you were just telling the truth. For once. Vincent turned to Linda. And you, dear. All those evenings you were visiting friends or at book club. Very creative scheduling. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Vincent, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You've always been good with explanations. Stories. Fiction. Vincent pulled out his phone and scrolled to an audio file. But I prefer facts. He pressed play. Rick's voice filled the room, crystal clear, $2 million in life insurance, plus the house, plus his retirement fund. We just need to be patient. Then Linda's voice. I'm tired of waiting. The man's healthy as a horse. Could live another 30 years. Ashley gasped. Derek's energy drink slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Not if he has an accident. Linda's recorded voice continued. Vincent's always working on dangerous projects. Construction sites, bridge inspections, accidents happen. Vincent stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. That's not. Linda stammered. It's exactly what it sounds like, Vincent said pleasantly. My wife and her lover planning my murder for insurance money. Very efficiently planned, actually. I'm almost impressed. Ashley was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Mom, how could you? Derek had gone completely pale. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid. The recording is fake, Linda said desperately. Someone's trying to frame us. This is crazy, Vincent. You're having some kind of breakdown. Linda. Vincent's voice was gentle now, almost kind. Stop. She stopped. I know about the cocaine in Rick's apartment. I know about your joint bank account at First National. I know about the condo you've been looking at in Riverside. I know about Derek's gambling debts and Ashley's unauthorized use of my professional references. Vincent smiled, and it was terrifying. I know everything. He pulled out a manila folder and set it on the coffee table. These are copies of everything I've discovered. Financial records, photographs, communications, witness statements. 26 years of marriage, and you've been planning to kill me for money. Linda lunged for the folder, but Vincent caught her wrist with surprising strength. I wouldn't, he said softly. Those are copies. The originals are in a very safe place. Derek finally found his voice. What do you want? Vincent released Linda's wrist and straightened his shirt. Want? I want nothing from any of you. You've made it clear what this family is worth. He looked at each of them in turn. But I'm going to give you something anyway. A gift? What kind of gift? Ashley whispered. Vincent's smile was cold as winter steel. The chance to see what happens when someone betrays me. Consider it a learning experience. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Linda? You might want to check your bank accounts. And Derek? Your bookie called. He seemed upset about something. Vincent left them sitting in the ruins of their lies, knowing that the real destruction hadn't even begun yet. Outside, he climbed into his rental car and drove away from the house for the second time in a week. But this time, he wasn't running. This time, he was beginning the hunt. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. 3 days after Vincent's revelation, the Montgomery family discovered the true extent of their situation. Linda stood in the bank manager's office, documents spread across the mahogany desk like evidence at a crime scene. I'm sorry, Mrs. Montgomery, but you no longer have access to these accounts, Mr. Patterson explained patiently. They've been restructured into a trust with your husband as the sole trustee. That's impossible. These are joint accounts. We're joint accounts. The restructuring was completed legally, with proper documentation. Your husband provided power of attorney papers that you signed last year for tax purposes. Linda's hands shook as she remembered signing a stack of papers Vincent had brought home from his lawyer, something about protecting their assets. She'd barely read them, trusting her husband's financial acumen as she always had. What about the house? Patterson's expression grew more sympathetic. The mortgage has been restructured as well, unless the monthly payments are maintained. He let the implication hang. Linda stormed out of the bank, her phone already ringing with calls from Rick. He'd discovered his own financial situation that morning. The cocaine habit Vincent had mentioned wasn't just knowledge, it was evidence. Photos, video, documented purchases. Someone had been very thorough in building a case. At home, Derek was discovering his own nightmare. The bookie Vincent had mentioned wasn't just upset, he was murderous. Derek owed $17,000 to people who broke kneecaps for late payments, and somehow his debt had been bought by a private collection agency that operated with brutal efficiency. Ashley found her own career prospects crumbling. Every reference Vincent had provided over the years was being systematically retracted. Emails to potential employers detailed her unauthorized use of his reputation, destroying her credibility in the marketing field before she'd even started. "He's trying to control us," Linda said that evening as the family gathered in their kitchen. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a prison with the walls closing in. Rick had arrived an hour earlier, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "It's worse than control. He's destroying us systematically." "But why?" Ashley asked, still unable to fully process her father's transformation. "I understand being angry, but this is Vincent," Derek said quietly. "I always thought he was weak, but he's not. He's patient. And now he's using everything he learned about patience and planning against us." Linda's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Conference room B at the Marriott downtown. 8 p.m. Come alone. V." She showed the message to the others. "Don't go," Rick said immediately. "It's obviously a trap." "Everything's a trap now," Linda replied bitterly. "At least this way I might learn what he wants." "He told us what he wants," Derek said. "To watch us burn." But Linda was already getting her purse. She'd spent 3 days watching her life disintegrate while Vincent remained invisible, pulling strings like a puppet master. She needed to face him, to understand what had happened to her methodical, predictable husband. The Marriott conference room was small and windowless, corporate neutral in the way of all hotel meeting spaces. Vincent sat at the far end of a rectangular table, a laptop open in front of him and a stack of folders arranged with military precision. He looked up when Linda entered, and she was struck again by how different he seemed. Not just angry or hurt, but transformed into something colder and more calculating than she'd ever imagined he could be. "Thank you for coming," he said politely, as if they were business associates rather than spouses of 26 years. "Vincent, please. We need to talk about this rationally." "Sit down, Linda." She sat, noting how he used her name like a weapon now, stripped of any affection or familiarity. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," Vincent continued conversationally. "About what you said to Derek on the phone. About waiting for me to die. I never meant. You meant exactly what you said. You've been planning my death for insurance money while sleeping with Rick Hawthorne and draining our accounts to fund his cocaine habit." Vincent opened one of the folders and slid a photograph across the table. "This was taken last Tuesday. You and Rick at the Riverside condo development, signing a lease for Unit 47B. Linda stared at the photo. She remembered that day. They'd been planning their future together, imagining life after Vincent's accident. "You're going to withdraw from that lease," Vincent said matter-of-factly. "You're going to end your relationship with Rick, and you're going to sign these documents." He pushed a thick stack of papers toward her. "What are they?" "Divorce papers. Very generous divorce papers, considering the circumstances. You keep the house if you can make the payments. You get half of one savings account, enough to live modestly if you're careful. Derek's debts disappear. Ashley's references are restored." Linda felt a flicker of hope. "And if I don't sign?" Vincent's smile was genuinely warm, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Then I release everything to the police, the media, and your respective employers. Rick goes to prison for cocaine possession and conspiracy to commit murder. Derek's bookie gets his current address and payment schedule. Ashley's unauthorized use of my professional credentials becomes a matter of public record. You can't prove conspiracy to commit murder from a private conversation. Perhaps not. But I can prove intent, opportunity, and financial motive. Combined with Rick's drug habit and history of financial problems, it builds a compelling case. Even if you avoid prison, the scandal destroys any chance either of you has at a normal life. Linda read through the divorce papers with growing despair. Vincent had been thorough. She would survive, but barely. No alimony, limited asset division, and strict conditions about contact with the children. Why are you doing this? We could work it out. Go to counseling. Vincent's laugh was sharp and bitter. Work it out? Linda, you planned to murder me. You spent months discussing the best way to make it look accidental. There's no counseling for that. People make mistakes when they're unhappy. Stop. Vincent's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. Don't diminish what you did by calling it a mistake. You made a calculated decision to end my life for money. The only mistake was getting caught. Linda signed the papers with trembling hands, her signature looking shaky and desperate on the official documents. What happens now? She asked when she finished. Vincent gathered the papers and slid them into his briefcase. Now you live with the consequences of your choices. The house payment is due in 2 weeks. Derek's new payment plan starts Monday. Ashley's job interviews are next week. I've provided new, accurate references. He stood and straightened his tie, looking every inch the successful engineer she'd married 26 years ago. Vincent, she called as he reached the door. Do you hate me? He paused without turning around. No, Linda. Hate would require me to still care about you. What I feel is much worse than hate. What? Indifference. Vincent left her sitting alone in the conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of their marriage and the systematic destruction of everything she'd planned for her future. Outside, he climbed into his rental car and checked his phone. Tomorrow, he would begin the final phase of his plan. Tonight, he would celebrate the successful completion of another complex engineering project. Some bridges, he reflected, were meant to be burned. Chapter 7. The Inheritance Revealed. 6 months later, Vincent stood in the cemetery where his father was buried, reading the inscription on the weathered granite headstone. Thomas Montgomery, engineer, father, builder of lasting things. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was about to complete the most lasting thing he'd ever built. Not a bridge or a building, but a legacy of consequences that would span generations. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Everything's ready. The will reading is scheduled for tomorrow. Vincent smiled grimly. Tomorrow would be the day his family learned the final truth about their situation. Not just that they'd lost access to his money, but that there never was any money to lose. Not in the way they'd imagined. The past 6 months had been illuminating. Linda had managed to keep the house by taking a job as a receptionist and moving Derek's gambling debts to a legitimate payment plan Vincent had arranged. Rick had fled to Florida after Vincent's evidence reached his family's law firm, effectively ending the affair and destroying Rick's prospects in the family business. Ashley had found work at a small marketing firm, humbled but learning to rebuild her career honestly. Derek, however, had been the most interesting case study. Cut off from family money and faced with real consequences, he'd initially spiraled deeper into gambling and self-pity. But when the collectors Vincent had hired started making regular visits, Derek had found motivation he'd never possessed before. He'd taken a job at a construction company, hard labor that left him too exhausted for gambling. For the first time in his adult life, Derek was earning his own money and paying his own bills. Vincent had observed all of this from a distance, like an engineer monitoring a stress test on a bridge. Each family member had been forced to discover who they really were when the safety net was removed. The results had been educational. Now it was time for the final phase of his plan. The law office of Henderson, Bradley and Associates was elegant in the way expensive lawyers preferred. Dark wood, leather chairs, and an air of respectability that money could buy. Linda arrived first, wearing the kind of modest dress she'd never owned during their marriage. Derek followed, looking uncomfortable in an ill-fitting suit he'd clearly borrowed. Ashley came last, checking her phone and glancing around nervously. Vincent was already seated when they arrived, having spent the morning with Mr. Henderson reviewing the final details. He nodded politely to his family as they took seats across from him, the conference table serving as a barrier between his new life and the wreckage of his old one. Thank you all for coming. Mr. Henderson began, adjusting his glasses. We're here to discuss the estate of Vincent Montgomery. Linda looked confused. Estate? Vincent isn't dead. No, Henderson agreed. But Mr. Montgomery has executed what's called a living will distribution. He's chosen to distribute his assets while alive to ensure his wishes are carried out precisely. Derek perked up for the first time in months. Despite everything that had happened, the prospect of inheritance still motivated him. Henderson opened a thick folder. The estate consists of several components. First, the primary residence at 847 Maple Heights Drive. That goes to Mom, right? Ashley asked hopefully. Actually, the house has been sold. The proceeds were used to establish the Montgomery Family Trust, administered by Mr. Vincent Montgomery as sole trustee. Linda's face went pale. Sold? When was it sold? Last month, Vincent said quietly. I gave you all 30 days' notice, as required by law. The papers were served to each of you individually. Derek's confusion was evident. But we've been living there. You've been renting, Henderson explained. The new owners have been very understanding about the transition period, but that arrangement ends next week. Ashley was reading through her copy of the documents. Dad, what is this? Where are we supposed to go? Vincent stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city he'd helped build through decades of infrastructure projects. That depends entirely on you. Henderson continued reading from the will. The Montgomery Family Trust contains approximately $2.3 million in assets, including real estate proceeds, investment accounts, and life insurance benefits that Mr. Montgomery cashed in early. The room fell silent. Even with everything that had happened, the number was larger than any of them had expected. However, Henderson continued, access to these funds is conditional. Conditional on what? Derek demanded. Vincent turned back to face them. On whether you've learned anything from the past 6 months. He moved back to the table and opened his own folder. The trust is structured as a merit-based system. Each of you can earn access to portions of the money by meeting specific criteria over a 5-year period. What kind of criteria? Linda asked suspiciously. For Derek, maintain steady employment for 2 consecutive years, complete a certified addiction recovery program, and make full restitution to every person he's harmed through gambling debts. Upon completion, he receives $100,000 in eligibility for education funding. Derek's mouth fell open. That's impossible. I can't. You can, Vincent interrupted. You've already started. The construction job is a good beginning. For Ashley, build a legitimate career without using family connections or misrepresenting her background. Demonstrate integrity in all professional dealings for 3 consecutive years. Upon completion, she receives $150,000 in business startup funding. Ashley was crying quietly. Dad, I'm trying. I really am. I know. Your new employer speaks very highly of your work ethic. Vincent turned to Linda. For Linda, maintain financial independence without assistance from romantic partners or family members. Complete community service equivalent to the value of assets she attempted to steal through fraud. Upon completion, she receives $75,000 in healthcare coverage. And if we don't meet your conditions? Linda asked bitterly. Then the money goes to various charities I've selected. Primarily organizations that help families destroyed by gambling, adultery, and financial fraud. Henderson closed the folder. The trust also contains provisions for housing assistance, medical emergencies, and education expenses, but only for family members actively participating in the rehabilitation program Mr. Montgomery has outlined. Derek was staring at the table, processing the implications. So we get money if we become the people you wanted us to be. No, Vincent said firmly. You get money if you become the people you should have been all along. The people you chose not to be when you thought there would be no consequences. Ashley looked up through her tears. What about you, Dad? What do you get out of this? Vincent gathered his papers and stood. I get to watch my family either destroy itself completely or rebuild into something worth preserving. Either outcome tells me what I need to know. And then what? Linda asked. After 5 years, what happens to us? Vincent paused at the door. That depends entirely on who you choose to become. The money was never the real inheritance. The real inheritance is whether you learn to value something other than money. He left them sitting in the lawyer's office, faced with a choice that would define the rest of their lives. Outside, Vincent climbed into his car, no longer a rental, but a modest sedan he'd purchased with cash from his new consulting business. 26 years of marriage, 25 years at Hartwell Engineering, and 52 years of life had taught him one fundamental truth. The strongest structures weren't built on foundations of sand. They were built on bedrock, solid, uncompromising, and able to withstand any storm. His family would either find their bedrock or crumble completely. Either way, Vincent Montgomery had finally built something that would last. Chapter 8. The Price of Truth. 1 year after the will reading, Vincent received 3 very different phone calls that revealed how his family was responding to their imposed rehabilitation. The first call came from Derek's supervisor at Brennan Construction. "Mr. Montgomery? This is Mike Brennan. I wanted you to know your son was promoted to crew leader today. Kid's been busting his ass for 8 months straight, never missed a day. Thought you should hear it from me." Vincent thanked Brennan and made a note in Derek's file. His son was making genuine progress. The gambling addiction program was working, and the steady income had given Derek his first taste of genuine self-respect. It was painful to watch sometimes, seeing his son struggle with basic adult responsibilities most people learned at 18. But Derek was learning. The second call came from Ashley's employer at Meridian Marketing. "Mr. Montgomery, I wanted to update you on Ashley's progress. She's exceeded all our expectations. Landed 3 major accounts this quarter using nothing but honest work and creative thinking. I know you asked us not to give her special treatment because of your references, but she's earning recognition on her own merit now." Ashley had been the quickest to adapt, perhaps because she'd always had the most integrity of his children. Losing the family safety net had forced her to develop real skills instead of relying on connections. She was becoming the professional she'd always had the potential to be. The third call was the most difficult. "Vincent, it's Linda." Her voice was tired, older somehow. "I wanted you to know I finished the community service requirement. 18 months of working at the women's shelter. I thought you should hear it from me." Vincent had monitored her progress through the shelter's director, who spoke highly of Linda's dedication to helping women escape abusive relationships. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Linda was counseling women who'd been betrayed by the people they trusted most. "How are you doing, Linda?" "I'm different. The work at the shelter, seeing what real problems look like. It's changed my perspective." Her voice cracked slightly. "I need to tell you something." Vincent waited. "I found Rick." Vincent's blood went cold. "Where?" "Florida. He's been calling me for months, asking for money, begging me to run away with him. He's desperate, Vincent. The drug habit got worse after he lost everything." "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth. That I destroyed our family for a man who was never worth destroying anything for. That I'm not the same person who planned to kill my husband for insurance money." Linda's voice was steady now, resigned. "He didn't take it well. Linda, he threatened to come back. Said he'd tell everyone the divorce was fake, that you coerced me into signing papers. He's desperate enough to try anything." Vincent closed his eyes. He'd been so focused on rebuilding his family that he'd underestimated the external threat Rick still posed. A desperate addict with nothing left to lose was dangerous in ways that even Vincent's methodical planning couldn't fully account for. "Where are you now?" "At work." "The shelter." "Vincent, I'm scared. Not for me, but for Derek and Ashley. Rick knows where they live, knows their routines." Vincent was already moving, grabbing his keys and the secure phone he used for serious business. "Stay at the shelter tonight. Call Derek and Ashley. Tell them to vary their routines. I'll handle Rick." "How?" "The same way I handled everything else. Thoroughly." Vincent's private investigator, Tony Russo, met him at a diner in downtown 30 minutes later. Tony had been monitoring Rick's activities in Florida as a precaution, and the news wasn't encouraging. "Guy's completely off the rails," Tony reported over coffee. "Lost his apartment 2 months ago, been sleeping in his car. The family cut him off completely after your evidence package reached them. He's desperate, unpredictable, and high most of the time." "How dangerous?" "Dangerous enough. He's been asking questions about your family's addresses, work schedules. Even tried to hire someone to deliver a message to Linda. My contact in Florida PD says he's on their radar, but they can't arrest him for being a desperate ex-boyfriend." Vincent studied the surveillance photos Tony had provided. Rick looked like a different person, gaunt, hollow-eyed, consumed by addiction and rage. This wasn't the charming businessman who'd seduced Linda. This was something feral and broken. Options. Legal options are limited. He hasn't actually threatened anyone directly, and stalking laws are hard to enforce across state lines. Tony leaned forward. Illegal options are more effective. Vincent considered this carefully. Everything he'd done to his family had been legal, if ruthless. But Rick represented a threat to the people Vincent was trying to rebuild, and sometimes engineering required demolition before construction could begin. Tell me about the illegal options. Tony smiled grimly. Rick's carrying drugs across state lines to support his habit. Interstate trafficking is a federal crime. If someone were to tip off the DEA about his travel patterns, complete with evidence of drug purchases and transportation, how long would he serve? With his quantity and the interstate element? 7 to 10 years minimum. Maybe more if we can prove he was planning to distribute. Vincent nodded slowly. Make the call. You sure? Once this starts, there's no taking it back. Rick made his choice when he threatened my family. I'm just ensuring he faces the consequences. 2 days later, Rick Hawthorne was arrested at a traffic stop in Georgia with enough cocaine in his car to guarantee a federal conviction. The evidence package that reached the DEA was thorough, documented, and devastating. Rick's desperate phone calls to Linda stopped immediately. Linda called Vincent that evening. I saw the news about Rick's arrest. Did you? You did that. I protected my family from a credible threat. Nothing more, nothing less. Linda was quiet for a long moment. The woman I was a year ago would have been horrified. The woman I am now is grateful. Which woman is real? Both. But I prefer the one I'm becoming. Vincent hung up and updated his files. Derek was 18 months away from his full inheritance eligibility. Ashley was 2 years away from hers. Linda was 3 years away from completing her requirements. Rick Hawthorne was 7 to 10 years away from threatening anyone again. Some problems, Vincent reflected, required engineering solutions. Others required permanent removal from the equation. The key was knowing which approach to use. Chapter 9. Bridges Built to Last. 5 years after Vincent Montgomery disappeared from his retirement party, he stood in the same cemetery where his father was buried. But this time, he wasn't alone. Derek stood beside him, wearing a hard hat and work clothes, having just finished his shift as a construction foreman. Ashley was on his other side, dressed in a business suit that marked her as the successful marketing executive she'd become. Linda stood slightly apart, respecting the distance that still existed between them, but present nonetheless. I never understood why you brought us here, Derek said, studying their grandfather's headstone. When we were kids, I mean. Because this is where everything started, Vincent replied. Your grandfather built things that lasted. Bridges, buildings, foundations. I wanted you to understand what legacy really means. Ashley held a manila folder that contained documents they'd all been waiting 5 years to see. The trust evaluation reports came in yesterday. Vincent nodded. He'd received copies from Henderson that morning, though he'd been monitoring everyone's progress continuously. The results were illuminating. Derek had exceeded every requirement. 2.5 years of steady employment, promotion to foreman, completion of not just 1 but 2 addiction recovery programs, and full restitution to everyone he'd harmed through gambling. More importantly, he'd married a woman named Sarah, a nurse he'd met in group therapy, and they were expecting their first child. I keep waiting for you to tell me this was all fake, Derek said quietly. That there's some final punishment coming. The only punishment was the consequences of your own choices, Vincent replied. Everything after that has been your decision. Ashley had built a legitimate career that surpassed anything she could have achieved through family connections. Her marketing firm now employed 12 people and had been featured in industry publications for innovative campaigns. She'd also started dating a teacher named Michael, a man who knew nothing about the Montgomery family drama and loved Ashley for who she'd become, not who she'd been. I understand now why you did it, Ashley said. We were never going to grow up as long as we had the family money as a safety net. Linda's transformation had been the most dramatic. The community service at the women's shelter had led to a full-time position as a counselor, then training as a social worker. She'd completed her bachelor's degree at 49 and was considering graduate school. The woman who'd once planned murder for insurance money now spent her days helping abuse victims rebuild their lives. I have something to tell you all, Vincent said, opening his own folder. The trust evaluations weren't just about whether you'd earned access to the money. They were about whether you'd learned to live without it. He pulled out a document and handed it to Ashley. The money is yours, as promised. All of it. Derek gets his full amount plus education funding for his children. Ashley gets hers plus the business expansion capital. Linda gets hers plus healthcare coverage for life. Derek's eyes widened. All of it. Even after. Especially after. Vincent's voice was firm. You've proven you can live without family money. Now you've proven you can be trusted with it. Linda stepped forward slightly. What about you, Vincent? What do you get? Vincent looked at each of them in turn. His son who'd learned integrity through hard work, his daughter who'd built success through honest effort, his ex-wife who'd found purpose in helping others heal from trauma similar to what she'd caused. I get a family worth having, he said simply. Ashley was reading through the documents, her expression growing surprised. Dad, according to this, you've been living on almost nothing for 5 years. A tiny apartment, basic expenses. Where did all your money go? Into the trust. Into monitoring your progress. Into ensuring you had support when you needed it and consequences when you didn't. Vincent pulled out another set of papers. And into this, he handed Derek a deed. Brennan Construction is expanding. They need a new partner with engineering expertise and someone who understands both the business and labor sides. Your name is on the partnership papers. Derek stared at the documents, his hands shaking slightly. Dad, I can't accept this. After everything I did. You can accept it because of everything you did after. Because you chose to change when change was hard. Ashley received her own surprise. Investment capital for a marketing firm expansion that would make her one of the youngest agency owners in the state. But more than that, she received something she'd never expected. A letter of recommendation from Vincent for the nonprofit board she'd been hoping to join. Linda's package was different. Instead of money, she received something more valuable. Legal documentation clearing her record of any association with the conspiracy charges that had destroyed Rick's life. Vincent had spent 2 years ensuring that Linda's transformation was legally protected, that her work at the shelter and her genuine rehabilitation were officially recognized. I don't understand, Linda said, tears streaming down her face. Why would you protect me after what I did? Because you became someone worth protecting. The woman who planned my murder is gone. The woman standing here now is someone I can respect, even if I can't love her the way I once did. Derek was studying his partnership papers with the intensity he'd once reserved for video games. Dad, why didn't you just forgive us? Take us back? Why the whole 5-year test? Vincent considered the question carefully. Because forgiveness without consequences isn't forgiveness, it's enabling. Real change requires real stakes. If I'd just given you money and lectures, you'd have learned nothing except that betrayal has no lasting cost. Ashley looked around the cemetery, understanding dawning in her eyes. This was never about money at all, was it? No. It was about whether the Montgomery family could be rebuilt on a foundation strong enough to last. Vincent touched his father's headstone gently. Your grandfather taught me that the strongest structures are the ones that can survive the worst possible stress tests. And did we? Derek asked. Survive the stress test? Vincent looked at his son, no longer the entitled boy who'd laughed about his father's death, but a man who'd earned his place in the world through honest work and genuine change. He looked at Ashley, who'd transformed from someone who used family connections into someone who built her own success. He looked at Linda, who'd found redemption through service to others. Yes, he said finally. You survived. More than that, you became people worth surviving for. As they walked away from the cemetery together, not as the broken family they'd been, but as individuals who'd learned to value something more than money, Vincent felt a satisfaction deeper than any engineering project had ever provided. He'd spent 25 years building bridges and roads that would outlast him. But his greatest engineering achievement was walking beside him now. A family rebuilt from the ground up, tested under maximum stress, and designed to last for generations. Some bridges, Vincent reflected, were worth burning to build better ones. The Montgomery family legacy would endure, not because of money, but because they'd finally learned what was truly worth inheriting. Epilogue. 10 years later. Vincent Montgomery sat in his office at Montgomery & Associates, the engineering consulting firm he'd built after leaving Hartwell. Through his window, he could see the Davidson Bridge, his latest project and perhaps his finest work. But the real masterpiece was the framed photo on his desk. Derek and Sarah with their 3 children, Ashley and Michael at their wedding, and Linda receiving her master's degree in social work. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Dad," it was Ashley's voice, excited and slightly breathless. "I have news. The adoption agency called. Michael and I are approved. We're going to be parents." Vincent smiled, remembering another phone call from years ago, Derek's cruel laughter about waiting for inheritance. Now his children called to share joy, not to mock him behind his back. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "Your grandfather would be proud. Of the adoption? Of the family we've all become." After hanging up, Vincent returned to his blueprints. He was designing a children's hospital, a project that would benefit from the donation Derek's construction company was providing and the marketing campaign Ashley's firm was running pro bono. Even Linda was involved, consulting on trauma-informed design for the pediatric wing. The Montgomery family had learned to build things that lasted. Not just wealth or success, but character, integrity, and the kind of love that survived any stress test. Vincent Montgomery had finally created his masterpiece, a family worth inheriting. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.